everyone, another underrated film coming to you, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about Ray. Now, in case some of you don't know what Ray is based on, Ray is based on Ray Charles, the famous rhythm and blues musician of the 1960s era, I guess you could say. And basically what this movie tries to focus on is sort of the 30-year time frame sort of his life. And this goes through, in particular, some of his earlier stages in life where, as probably everybody who knows who Ray Charles is probably know, that he suffers from being blind. And they sort of use that and kind of show you a little bit how he sort of lost his eyesight. And then you sort of see how he gets into music and how he sort of, follows his own path and kind of creates this purpose to his life through his music. And it is really intended to be a biographical film. It is intended to be on more of the lines of, I guess you could say, trying to display things through a lot of dialogue. This is a very dialogue and character-driven movie, as you can probably tell, because it is focusing on him and the people that basically just surround sort of his life and sort of the time period as well, dealing with segregation and, the civil rights movement that was going on during the time when he was becoming really well known and really famous. That's really what this movie is trying to sort of get you with. And also he ends up suffering later on, sort of in the film, this drug addiction problem. And you'll see how this really affects his life and how his life is kind of transformed by his drug use and how he kind of sort of tries to get out of it, and it just sort of follows these different kinds of points within his life. So I don't think there's really intended to be like like really necessarily building up so much to really anything like a climax. I think this film intends to be a little bit more of a biographical look into the various different aspects of Ray Charles's life. But really, that's a lot of what this film is really trying to say. As far as plot-wise is concerned, again, we get these various different kinds of stages within his life, and how those stages kind of hold a purpose or a meaning. And the reason why I think this film is a little bit underrated is just nobody really talks about it. I don't think anybody really recognizes this movie so much. Jamie Foxx, though, did win an Academy Award for Best Actor, and he plays Ray Charles. And his acting is very good. I think he really tries to get the movements down, like how he expresses sort of his body and his body language. You can sort of tell that he is trying to sort of bring Ray Charles sort of to life on the screen. And you'll also see how some of the other characters become very significant as well, particularly Ray Charles's mother, who's played by Sharon Warren, or I guess the mother's name being Arthea Robinson. And basically, she kind of really helps him sort of be independent, and you'll sort of see how she comes in within various points, and how ultimately her impact onto his very young life has allowed him to overcome very great obstacles that have been in his way, in particular with drug addiction. And you'll see this one powerful scene where it sort of does emphasize this idea. So, definitely one significant character to mention. Another person who stars in this movie is Kerry Washington, and she plays Ray Charles's wife, whose name is Della Bia Robinson. And basically, you'll see how she comes in as well, being sort of someone that, sort of Ray takes a liking to, and you'll kind of see how their relationship is sort of tested at points because of his addiction sort of later on in the film. And I think for the most part, everybody else does a significant job, a significantly good job. I just think that Jamie Foxx is just given more of a presence on screen than all the other characters. And what I really like about this film is I like how it's kind of this biographical look, and it's also nice to see how Ray Charles sort of did his music. And you will see points where they're like in the studio, and you sort of get a sense of his, business life and how he structures things, and how not everything is always so rosy, or maybe goes the way that he wants it to. And I think it's just trying to touch not only his professional career, but his personal life as well. Again, mentioning with the drug addiction, having a wife and a family and such. I think it's trying to highlight these various little aspects of his life, and show you sort of who he was as a person. I think that's really what this film is really trying to say. I guess it can be taken as to how accurate it is, because I am not sure from the research I could tell. It didn't really say specifically sort of how accurate it is. But I think Ray Charles himself, I think he wanted to see the theatrical release. I think they did take a lot of his life stories and such and put those into perspective. But they said that he died, from the research that I've done. They said that he actually died the months before the theatrical release. So he was never able to actually see the film, unfortunately. Which is kind of a bummer, that's kind of sad. You have this really nice biographical look into you, and then you're not around to see it. I guess it is that kind of a bummer, downer type situation. But at the same time, I guess that I'm sure that he would have appreciated that they would go to such lengths to actually make a film about him, and focus in on that. So yes, I think it's just a little. It just depends on whether you like these kinds of a biographical looks. If you like music a lot, if you're a big music fan, this would probably appeal to you as well, because Ray Charles sort of deals a lot with what some other musicians probably have dealt with, and it's kind of highlighted in there that sometimes sometimes the most well-known people can come from the most humblest of beginnings, similar to how he does really live a poor life as a young boy, but then as he's able to grow up and make something of himself, I think that's just something that we can all identify with, and it's kind of nice to see that shine through in such an era as like the 1960s, when we're dealing with things like the civil rights movement and such. And I think they do try to emphasize his blindness and that and how it really sort of affects him, because he can use his, like, hearing, and I think the hearing is very important because since he's a musician and music really intentionally involves hearing, it makes it maybe easier for him to use that sense than maybe some other people. You'll see a scene where he's with his future wife and they're just talking. They're not married at that point, but they're talking, and he says that he can hear the hummingbird outside, and she can't hear it, but it's because she doesn't use she has all these different senses, and she's not focusing in on one sense because she can see and he can't. So when Ray Charles can't see, he can use his other senses to sort of listen and pay attention to things like detail, and I think those things are very important. And I think they really do. The film does try to highlight sort of his contribution to music. Also, it sort of highlights, that the music industry, especially back then, was really structured as a business, and it was designed in that sort of business format. And you can see this throughout tons of different eras, but in particular, I think this era was really focused on trying to make certain people marketable and appealing. So I think you'll see how the movie maybe focuses in a little bit on that as well, just the whole business structure, because you'll see in tons of different scenes how they're making all these like business type-ish decisions, and how Ray Charles, and then you'll see how Ray Charles feels about those decisions, and I think what it really tries to do is it just tries to give you a sense of what Ray Charles was as a character, and I think this is probably one of the best, I think, as far as performances are concerned, by a African American that I've seen, because Jamie Foxx does just such a great job. And another person who does a really awesome job too is Denzel Washington, and I think it's nice to kind of see these different actors who I'm maybe not used to so much seeing, and then seeing them and kind of taking in, how really important and impacting they can be on the movie-going community. And I think that's really I think that's very important, and it's nice to see that Jamie Foxx did win an Academy Award for this. I just think it kind of just got put under the bus, though, and nobody really paid attention to it, I think. Just because a movie wins an Academy Award, I don't think that makes it somehow like everybody knows what that film is. I think a lot of people didn't really even know about the artist until you heard about it being really nominated and being really recognized. And yeah, and then I think sometimes what ends up happening is that it may be popular during the time as it comes out, but then later on it just kind of slips in the background. And I think this film is one of those films. I think it did kind of slip under the bus, and I think that's not really fair, because I believe Jamie Foxx just did a brilliant job, and I think that the whole way that they set up the film, I think it really works as to showing these different aspects of Ray Charles's life. And I think we're dealing with, this particular era that is fairly interesting, considering the '60s was a very complex era, and I think it's nice to see these kinds of performances that can be done about that time period that sort of reflect someone who was broadly recognized, and who was able to, stand out even from the difficulties that surrounded the 1960s, especially for the African American community. So yeah, I think that's really what this film is really trying to say. I think it's just nice to see a film that kind of approaches it from that level. But for the most part, that's really all I can say without giving too much away as far as the plot is concerned. All you kind of have to know about going into it is that it's a movie about Ray Charles, and it's a really well done movie about Ray Charles. And I think that's really what you are going to get from this film. However, if you don't find Ray Charles to be interesting, if you don't like music for whatever reason, or like the kinds of music that he does, or if you are someone who I guess if you're just someone who maybe doesn't like these biographical-esque type films, then you're probably not gonna like it. But if you do, and you sort of admire the acting and the actors, I wouldn't say necessarily that the dialogue is anything interesting. I don't think the dialogue it's not boring. I don't think it's boring dialogue. It's just not so, I think it's meant to be more realistic, and it's not meant to be so, like, intellectual. This isn't an intellectual type-esque film. It's not trying to be super duper smart, in the sense that it's trying to, display things that are, I guess you could say, very maybe witty. Again, this isn't really like maybe Pulp Fiction or something like that. It's not that kind of a film. But it's still a film that really does focus on the characters and really does focus on people talking, and does sort of focus on these different aspects of Ray Charles's life that would have to deal with talking and relationships and such. So it's really is a character-driven movie, but it does it in a way that I think is effective, and is fairly realistic. I don't think you would get Ray Charles as somebody who, is spewing out lines that are like Shakespearean or something. No. You're going to get lines that are just fairly more just down to earth, and more of a style that's maybe more reflective onto the time period, and is not necessarily trying to display this higher sort of intelligence. I think it is an intelligent film, but it's not doing, I think, necessarily anything new or anything very innovative. But I think it's doing it in a way that's effective, and if people find this kind of a telling effective, then I definitely would recommend it. So I think that's really all I can say about this film. I just think it's just something that I think people should take more into consideration, and it's got a really good score on Rotten Tomatoes last time I checked. It seems to be like people really do consider this film to be fairly engaging, and I think that's really all I can say about it. But any questions, comments, concerns, I'm more than happy to answer them, and until next time, bye-bye everybody.